There's a man, let's call him David, who worked for 40 years. 40 years of showing up, getting paid, paying bills, raising a family. And when he turned 72 and finally sat down to look at what he had saved, it was less than $3,000. Not because he was lazy, not because he was reckless, not because he never cared. He cared. He always thought about it. He always meant to start. And somehow, after 4 decades of working, he arrived at old age with almost nothing and genuinely couldn't explain how. If that story sounds familiar, if you've seen it in someone you know, or felt some version of it in yourself, then what I'm about to share might be one of the most important things you'll watch this year. Because this isn't a story about bad decisions. It's a story about psychology, about 5 specific mental patterns that quietly do their work across an entire lifetime. And most people carrying them have no idea they're there. I'm Burke, and this is Blue Money Mind. If you're new here, this channel is about the psychology behind financial behavior, not tips and tricks, but the deeper patterns that actually drive what people do with money. If that's the kind of content you want more of, subscribe and hit the bell right now, because we go places most financial channels don't. So let's start with something that might reframe this entire conversation. According to a 2024 AARP survey, 1 in 5 Americans over the age of 50 has 0 retirement savings. Not a little, 0. And the Federal Reserve found that over half of all American households have no dedicated retirement savings at all. Now, when most people hear those numbers, they assume the explanation is obvious. People didn't earn enough, or they spent too much, or they just didn't care. But here's what's actually interesting. Researchers who study this don't describe it as a failure of responsibility. They describe it as a failure of psychology. Specifically, a mismatch between a brain built for the present and a future that requires decades of invisible sacrifice. And when you look at the people who arrive at old age with nothing, 5 psychological traits show up over and over again. Not moral failures, patterns, identifiable, nameable patterns. And here's what makes this uncomfortable. Most people have at least 2 of them right now, without knowing it. The first one is something behavioral economists call present bias. And the way it works is almost embarrassingly simple once you see it. Your brain doesn't treat the future as equally real to the present. It discounts it. The further away something is, the less weight your mind gives it. Not proportionally, but dramatically. Richard Thaler, who won the Nobel Prize for his work in behavioral economics, described this as a war inside every person between 2 versions of themselves. The planner, the part of you that knows saving is important, that makes the resolution, that sets the intention. And the doer, the part of you that wakes up every morning and has to actually live that intention in a world full of immediate things that feel much more real. And in that war, the doer wins almost every time. Not because you're weak, because that's how the brain is wired. In one well-known experiment, people were given a choice between $50 today or $100 in 6 months. A large proportion chose the $50. Now think about what retirement savings actually asks of you. Not 50 versus 100, not 6 months. 30 years. The brain cannot feel 30 years as real. End. It can understand it intellectually, but it cannot feel it. And we act on what we feel, not just what we understand. But here's where it gets even more interesting. And this is the second trait, and probably the most surprising one. Research from psychologist Hal Hershfield at UCLA showed something that most people find genuinely unsettling when they first hear it. When people think about their future selves, the person they'll be at 70, at 75, the brain activates the same neural regions it activates when thinking about a stranger. Not yourself, a stranger. Which means, on a neurological level, saving money for your retirement doesn't feel like investing in yourself. It feels like giving your money away to someone you've never met. And when Hirschfield showed participants age-progressed images of themselves, what they would actually look like in 30 or 40 years, those people allocated significantly more money toward retirement. Not because they received new information, because they suddenly felt connected to that future person, because that stranger finally had a face. The person who arrives at 70 with nothing didn't fail to plan. They failed to feel connected to who they would become. And the system never asked them to build that connection. The third trait is subtler, and it runs deeper than the first two. Researchers call it external locus of control, and in plain language, it means believing that life outcomes are determined by forces outside of yourself: luck, circumstance, other people, fate. You've probably heard versions of it. Things always work out somehow, or I'll figure it out when I get there, or you can't really plan that far ahead anyway. And on the surface, it can sound like optimism, like resilience. But what a major study using longitudinal data from thousands of households found is this: people with an external locus of control save dramatically less money across their lifetimes at every income level. Not just a little less, dramatically less. And the gap in accumulated wealth is actually largest for lower income households, meaning this belief hits hardest the people who can afford it least. Because when you genuinely believe that your financial future doesn't depend on your actions, the act of saving stops making sense. Why delay pleasure today for a future that isn't really in your hands anyway? This isn't irrational inside the belief system. It's completely logical. The problem is the belief system itself. And for many people, it was installed in childhood, in households where financial instability was real and planning truly didn't change outcomes. The brain learned, save yourself the disappointment. Don't try to control what can't be controlled. And decades later, it's still running that program. Now, the fourth trait is the one that most people recognize immediately and then immediately justify. It's called lifestyle inflation. And here's how it works. You get a raise, you move into a nicer apartment. A few years later, another raise. You buy a better car, then a bigger home, nicer vacations, better restaurants. And at every stage, you still feel like you're living paycheck to paycheck, just with better things around you. That's not an accident. There's a psychological mechanism behind it called hedonic adaptation, the tendency of the mind to return to a baseline level of satisfaction, no matter how much you upgrade. The joy of the new apartment fades. The thrill of the car becomes background noise. So you need the next upgrade to feel something again. And what psychologist Brad Klontz found in his research on what he calls money status scripts is that a significant number of people unconsciously link their self-worth to what they display, not what they have. Accumulate. The upgrade isn't just comfort, it's identity. And here's the cruel irony. The research shows that people earning $150,000 a year can arrive at retirement with less savings than people who never made more than $60,000. Because income doesn't determine savings. The gap between what you earn and what you spend does. And lifestyle inflation quietly closes that gap every single time you get ahead. But the fifth trait, this is the one that tends to hit people the hardest because it's the most invisible. Behavioral researchers who study what Brad Klontz calls money avoidance scripts describe a pattern where people don't just fail to save, they actively look away. They avoid checking their accounts. They feel a physical discomfort around financial planning. They change the subject when retirement comes up. They tell themselves it'll work out without knowing why or how. And underneath that avoidance, there are often beliefs formed very early, sometimes so early there's no conscious memory of them. Beliefs like, money is dangerous, wealthy people are corrupt, I don't deserve to be financially secure, money isn't something people like me accumulate. Klontz's research found that these unconscious beliefs, which he calls money scripts, are formed in childhood, passed down through generations, and can become genuinely resistant to change even when the person intellectually knows better. The woman who earns a good salary and still has nothing saved isn't careless. She might be protecting herself from something she can't fully name. And that protection, built to keep her safe, ended up costing her everything. Now here's the nuance that matters. These 5 traits are not a sentence. They are not a moral indictment. They're patterns, and patterns, once named, can be interrupted. Most of the people who carry them don't carry just one. They carry 2 or 3 or 4, layered on top of each other, each one reinforcing the others. Present bias makes the future feel fake. Disconnection from the future self makes saving feel pointless. External locus of control makes action feel useless. Lifestyle inflation absorbs whatever margin was left. And money avoidance makes sure no one ever stops to look clearly at what's happening. That's not chaos. That's a system. A system built by a brain trying to protect itself that no one ever explained to the person living inside it. And that's what connects all 5 of these traits at their core. The human brain was built to survive the present. It is extraordinarily good at that. And we are asking it, without training, without explanation, to sacrifice real comfort today for a future it cannot emotionally feel, for a self it perceives as a stranger, in a world it believes it cannot fully control. Is it really surprising that so many people arrive at 70 with nothing? The surprising thing, honestly, is that anyone saves at all. The people who do the research suggests aren't just more disciplined. They're people who somehow built a connection to their future selves, who internalized the belief that their actions matter, who learned to recognize the upgrade trap before it closed around them. That's not luck. And it's not a personality type you're born with. It's a psychological orientation, and it can be learned. The brain that kept you alive in the present is the same brain that can quietly bankrupt your future. And the most unsettling part is that it never announces what it's doing. It just feels like living. That's what makes these 5 traits so worth understanding, not to judge anyone, but to finally see the pattern clearly enough to do something about it. If any of this landed, if you recognized one of these traits in yourself or in someone you love, tell me in the comments which one felt the most real. And if you want more content like this psychology applied to the way people actually think about money, subscribe to Blue Money Mind, because there's a lot more to unpack.